I am Lillian, 32 years old, and I always believed family came first. That was until I received a text from my mother after spending $400,000 on their dream house. The message read, "You are not coming on the cruise. Dad wants just family. Just family." After everything I had done for them. What they did not know was that while they were sailing the Caribbean, I was selling their house. Before I tell you what happened when they returned home, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you have ever felt betrayed by family. Growing up in Seattle, my childhood looked perfect on paper. Our middle-class neighborhood was filled with well-maintained homes, manicured lawns, and families that seemed to have it all figured out. But within the walls of our house, there was always an unspoken hierarchy that placed me at the bottom. I was the youngest of 3 children with 2 older brothers, Jason and Michael, who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Jason, the oldest, followed in our father Richard's footsteps, becoming a successful accountant. Michael, the middle child, became a doctor, fulfilling our mother Eleanor's dream of having a medical professional in the family. And then there was me, the daughter, who somehow never quite measured up. My father was a stern man with exacting standards. He had built his accounting practice through discipline and hard work values he tried to instill in all of us. But while my brothers received patient guidance and praise for their efforts, I received criticism and dismissive comments. "Lillian, why can you not be more like your brothers?" became a refrain I heard throughout my childhood. They know how to apply themselves. Even when I brought home straight, as my father would scan my report card and ask no A+. Meanwhile, Michael would receive congratulations for his B+ grades because medicine is such a difficult field. My mother, a kindergarten teacher who spent her days nurturing other people's children, rarely stepped in to defend me. She had grown up in a traditional household and believed that supporting her husband's decisions was paramount. Whenever I sought her protection from my father's harsh judgments, she would say, "Your father just wants what is best for you, Lillian. Try harder to please him." The disparity in treatment became even more pronounced during holiday gatherings and family celebrations. My brother's achievements were announced with pride, while mine were mentioned as afterthoughts, if at all. When I won the state science competition in 10th grade, my father dismissed it as one of those girl empowerment things, suggesting I had only won because the judges wanted to encourage female participants. My passion for technology emerged early. At 12, I disassembled and rebuilt our family computer when it crashed, saving all the data my father had not backed up for his business. Instead of gratitude, I received a lecture about messing with things I did not understand. "Computers are not for girls," my father said dismissively. "It is just a phase. You will grow out of it." But I did not grow out of it. If anything, my interest intensified. While other teenagers decorated their rooms with posters of bands and movie stars, mine featured diagrams of circuit boards and profiles of women in STEM. I spent weekends coding rather than at the mall, teaching myself programming languages from books I checked out from the library. By the time college applications rolled around, I knew exactly what I wanted to study: computer science. I applied to the University of Washington's prestigious program, believing my excellent grades and extracurricular activities in technology would make me a shoo-in. And they did. I was accepted with a partial merit scholarship. Computer science, my father scoffed when I shared the news. "What kind of career is that for a woman? You will be surrounded by men who know more than you do." Richard, my mother, interjected her voice. "Gentle but ineffectual times are changing. Maybe Lillian knows what she is doing." "She has no idea what she is doing," he retorted. "And I am not wasting money on a degree that will not lead anywhere." That was the moment I realized I would have to make my own way. While my brothers had received full financial support for their education, I would receive none. The partial scholarship would help, but it was not enough to cover tuition, books, and living expenses. I took out student loans and worked 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at a coffee shop near campus, weekend hours at the university's IT help desk, and night shifts entering data for a local business. I slept 4 hours a night and still maintained a 3.9 gigapascals. During those years, my visits home became less frequent. Each time I did visit, I arrived with hopes that my determination might finally earn my parents' approval, only to leave feeling more invisible than before. Still playing with computers, my father would ask, as if my major and growing expertise were equivalent to a child's hobby. Despite everything, I still craved their recognition. Each achievement, each small success, was mentally dedicated to the day when they would finally say, "We are proud of you, Lillian." I imagined the moment countless times, picturing my father's face softening with pride and my mother's eyes filling with tears of joy. That fantasy kept me going through the hardest times, pushing me to excel even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. When I graduated summa cum laude, neither of my parents attended the ceremony. My father had a crucial client meeting he could not reschedule, and my mother would not come without him. My brothers were too busy with their own lives to make the trip. I sat alone among classmates, surrounded by cheering families clutching my diploma and forcing a smile for photographs that would never be displayed in my parents' home. That day, something hardened within me. I made a silent vow that I would prove my worth, not just to my family, but to the world. If they could not see my value, others would. I would make them regret their dismissal of me and my chosen path. It was not the healthiest motivation, perhaps, but it gave me the drive to push forward when all I wanted to do was give up. The technology startup that hired me right out of college was small, just 15 people working out of a converted warehouse in Seattle's industrial district. The pay was modest, but they offered something more valuable than money: the opportunity to innovate. As one of only 2 women on the technical team, I worked twice as hard to prove myself, arriving earlier and leaving later than anyone else. 6 months in, during a company hackathon, I developed an algorithm that significantly improved our product's data processing speed. What had taken minutes now took seconds. My colleagues were impressed, but our CEO was ecstatic. My innovation became the cornerstone of our platform's competitive advantage. "This is game-changing, Lillian," he told me, clapping me on the shoulder. "You just put us on the map." Within 3 years, our user base grew from thousands to millions. Venture capital firms took notice and investment poured in. My salary increased, but more importantly, so did my equity stake in the company. I was promoted to lead developer, then chief technology officer, by the time I turned 27. When a tech giant approached us with an acquisition offer, I was part of the negotiation team. The final number, $350 million. My equity stake translated to $8.5 million after taxes. I was 30 years old and financially set for life. I bought a sleek, modern apartment in San Francisco's Russian Hill neighborhood with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the bay. I filled it with mid-century modern furniture, original artwork, and the latest smart home technology. For the first time in my life, I indulged myself: designer clothes, fine dining, first-class travel. I donated generously to organizations promoting women in technology and established a scholarship for girls pursuing computer science degrees. Yet despite all this external success, an emptiness lingered. The fantasy of my parents' approval had not dimmed with time or achievements. If anything, it had intensified. Surely now, with this undeniable success, they would finally acknowledge my worth. I called home more frequently, casually mentioning my company's acquisition in what I hoped was a modest way. My mother made appropriate sounds of congratulation, but quickly shifted the conversation to Jason's recent promotion or Michael's new house. "That is nice, dear," she said after I told her about the acquisition. "Did I tell you Michael's wife is expecting again? It will be their 3rd. Your father is so excited to have another grandchild." During one Sunday call, I finally worked up the courage to ask directly, "Are you and Dad proud of what I have accomplished?" A pause then. "Of course we are, Lillian. We just worry about you all alone in that city. When are you going to settle down like your brothers? Success is nothing without family to share it with." The irony of her statement was not lost on me. Here I was desperate to share my success with my family while they were dismissing it as somehow incomplete because I did not have a husband or children. In the spring of that year, during one of our calls, my mother mentioned almost casually that they were having financial difficulties. The housing market crash had affected my father's client base, and many had scaled back their accounting needs or sought cheaper options. Additionally, their mortgage rate had adjusted upward, making their monthly payments nearly unmanageable. "We might have to sell the house," my mother said, her voice breaking slightly. "Your father does not want to retire yet, but he might not have a choice. We could downsize to something smaller, but you know how he loves this place." The house they lived in was not the one I grew up in. They had moved to a larger home in a more prestigious neighborhood after I left for college, a home I had visited only a handful of times. Still, I knew how much it meant to them, especially my father. It represented his success, his status in the community. A plan began forming in my mind. Here was my opportunity to finally earn their recognition and gratitude. I could solve their financial problems easily with my newfound wealth. I could save their home, or better yet, buy them a new one, outright one they could own free and clear without mortgage worries. The idea took root and blossomed. I would find them the perfect home, one that matched all their preferences: my father's desire for a prestigious address, my mother's wish for a garden, enough space for when my brothers and their families visited. It would be my grand gesture, irrefutable proof of my success and my love for them despite everything. I shared my plan with my best friend Amanda over dinner at a trendy restaurant in the Mission District. Her expression shifted from surprise to concern as I outlined what I intended to do. "Lillian," she said gently, setting down her wine glass, "that is a lot of money to spend on people who have never really supported you. Are you sure this is about them and not about finally getting the approval you have always wanted?" "Does it matter?" I asked defensively. "They are my parents and they need help." Amanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I just do not want to see you hurt again. Your parents have a pattern of dismissing your accomplishments and favoring your brothers. Why would this be any different?" "Because this time it is something they cannot ignore," I insisted. "This is not just a degree or a job they do not understand. This is a house, something tangible and valuable by anyone's standards." Amanda sighed, unconvinced. "Just promise me you will protect yourself legally. Make sure whatever you do does not leave you vulnerable." I promised, but in my heart I believed this gesture would finally bridge the gap between us. This would be the thing that made them see me, truly see me at last. Finding the perfect house became my obsession. I spent hours each evening scrolling through real estate listings in Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods. I created spreadsheets comparing features, proximity to my parents' friends, and favorite places, and potential for appreciation. I wanted this gift to be perfect in every way, something they could not possibly dismiss or minimize. After 2 months of searching, I found it a stunning 4,000-square-foot Craftsman in Madison Park, one of Seattle's most prestigious neighborhoods. Built in the 1920s, but completely renovated, it featured 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances, hardwood floors throughout, and a beautifully landscaped yard with mature fruit trees. The master suite included a sitting area with a gas fireplace and a spa-like bathroom with a soaking tub overlooking the garden. Most importantly, it was just 3 blocks from Lake Washington, where my father had always dreamed of living. The asking price was $380,000, but I was prepared to go as high as $450,000 if necessary. I flew to Seattle the next day and toured the house with a real estate agent. It was even more beautiful in person than in the photographs. I could picture my mother in the kitchen preparing Sunday dinner for the family. I could see my father in the wood-paneled study working on his accounts or reading the paper in the comfortable leather chair by the window. I made an offer that afternoon, $20,000 above asking price, to ensure it would be accepted. Within 3 weeks, the house was mine. I hired an interior designer to furnish it according to my parents' taste. Traditional furniture with clean lines, warm colors, plush rugs, and tasteful artwork. I instructed the designer to create a space that felt both elegant and comfortable, somewhere my parents could entertain their friends with pride, but also relax at the end of the day. For the master bedroom, I selected a handcrafted king-size bed from a local artisan and luxury linens with the highest thread count available. The guest bedrooms were furnished with my brothers and their families in mind, with plenty of space and amenities to make extended stays comfortable. I even created a playroom for my nieces and nephews, filled with educational toys and books. The day before the reveal, I walked through the house one last time, making sure everything was perfect. Fresh flowers adorned every room, and the refrigerator and pantry were fully stocked with my parents' favorite foods. A bottle of Dom Perignon chilled in an ice bucket on the kitchen counter, waiting to be opened in celebration. I had not told my parents about the house yet. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. I had invited them to lunch at a restaurant nearby, planning to drive them past the house afterward and reveal my gift. When I picked them up the next day, my mother commented on my appearance. You look nice, Lillian. That is a lovely dress. Is it new? Thank you, Mom. Yes, I bought it especially for today. My father, sitting in the passenger seat, merely nodded in greeting. He seemed preoccupied, checking his watch several times during the short drive to the restaurant. I hope this does not take too long, he said. I have calls to make this afternoon. I promise it will be worth your time, I assured him, trying to contain my excitement. Lunch was pleasant enough, with my mother carrying most of the conversation, updating me on family news and neighborhood gossip. My father ate quickly, his attention divided between his meal and his smartphone. After dessert, I paid the bill and suggested we take a drive before I returned them home. I want to show you something, I said, my heart racing with anticipation. What is it? My father asked, impatience edging his voice. It is a surprise. Please just trust me. It will only take a few minutes. I drove slowly through the tree-lined streets of Madison Park, pointing out features of the neighborhood as if I were a tour guide. This is a beautiful area, I commented, so close to the lake. My father grunted in acknowledgement. Properties here go for a fortune. Your brother Michael looked at a house in this neighborhood last year, but even with his doctor's salary, he could not afford it. I smiled to myself, turning onto the street where the house stood. I pulled up directly in front, put the car in park, and turned to face them. What do you think of this house? I asked, gesturing toward the beautiful craftsman with its welcoming front porch and meticulous landscaping. My mother admired it openly. It is gorgeous, such character. Nothing like those cookie-cutter new builds. My father was more reserved. Nice enough. Probably needs a lot of work inside, though. These old houses always do. Would you like to see the inside? I asked, reaching into my purse for the keys. My mother looked confused. Lillian, we cannot just go into someone's house. We can, if it is yours, I said, handing them the keys with a small gold bow attached. Surprise, I bought it for you. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock. My mother's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. What do you mean you bought it for us? My father demanded, not taking the keys. Exactly that. I bought this house for you. It is completely paid for, no mortgage. The utilities are set up and paid for the first year. It is furnished and move-in ready. All you have to do is pack your personal belongings. But why? How my mother stammered. The company I helped build was acquired last year. I did very well in the deal, and I wanted to do something special for you both. You have always talked about living near the lake, and now you can. My father's expression was unreadable. He took the keys, slowly turning them over in his hand, as if testing their weight and reality. Can we see inside? My mother asked, already opening her car door. The next hour was a blur of emotions as I led them through their new home. My mother cried when she saw the kitchen, running her hands over the marble countertops and professional-grade stove. My father was silent but attentive as I showed him the study, custom built with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk positioned to catch the morning light. The master suite is upstairs, I said, leading them up the elegant staircase with its restored original banister. When they saw the expansive bedroom with its sitting area and fireplace, my mother sank down onto the upholstered bench at the foot of the bed, overwhelmed. Lillian, I do not know what to say. This is too much. Nothing is too much for my parents, I replied, the words catching slightly in my throat. This was the moment I had imagined for so long. You gave me life, raised me, supported me. Now I can do something for you. My father stood by the window looking out at the garden below. His back was to us, shoulders rigid. When he finally turned, I was stunned to see moisture in his eyes. No one has ever done anything like this for me, he said quietly. Not in my whole life. It was the closest thing to gratitude I had ever received from him, and I treasured it like a rare gem. For the first time, I felt seen by my father, acknowledged as someone of value and substance. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as my parents sold their old house and moved into the new one. I took time off work to help with the transition, organizing the move and helping them settle in. My mother, typically reserved with physical affection, hugged me spontaneously several times a day. My father, while still not demonstrative, spoke to me differently with a new tone of respect. I rented a small apartment nearby, planning to spend at least a month in Seattle to help them adjust. We had dinner together almost every night, conversations flowing more easily than they ever had before. My mother shared stories from my childhood that I had never heard, and my father occasionally asked questions about my work, showing a nascent interest in understanding what I did. "So your algorithm, it makes the computers work faster?" he asked one evening over coffee and dessert. "In a way, yes," I explained, careful not to overwhelm him with technical details. "It changed how the system processes large amounts of information, making it more efficient." He nodded thoughtfully. "And that is why your company was valuable, because you made it more efficient." "That was one of the reasons, yes." "Smart," he said simply. And though the praise was minimal by most standards from him, it felt monumental. I began to believe that the relationship I had always wanted with my parents might finally be possible. The walls built over decades of misunderstanding and dismissal seemed to be crumbling brick by brick. But as the weeks passed, subtle changes emerged. My father's questions about my work became less frequent. His comments took on a familiar, dismissive tone. "All this computer stuff," he said one evening, waving his hand vaguely, "it is just pushing buttons, is not it? Not like real work where you build something with your hands or help people like your brother Michael does." My mother, initially so grateful and affectionate, began to critique small elements of the house: the placement of a light fixture, the color of the guest room walls, the variety of trees in the garden. "If only the designer had consulted us," she sighed, though I had specifically chosen items based on preferences they had expressed over the years. The family dinners became less frequent as they began to establish their social circle in the new neighborhood. When I was invited, the conversation often revolved around my brother's accomplishments or the challenges my parents faced adapting to a new area despite its prestige. One evening, as I helped my mother clear the dinner dishes, she said casually, "Your brother Jason is thinking of starting his own accounting firm. He will need startup capital, of course. Since you have done so well, perhaps you could invest in his business. It would mean so much to your father." The implication was clear. My gift, my gesture, while appreciated, was now expected to be just the beginning of my financial support. The house was no longer seen as an extraordinary act of generosity, but as a baseline obligation from a daughter who could afford it. The realization was a cold wave washing over me. The relationship had not fundamentally changed. The dynamics remained the same, only now with the added expectation of continued financial assistance. Despite the disappointing shifts in our relationship, I held on to hope. Perhaps I was expecting too much too soon. Decades of established patterns could not change overnight or even over a few months. I needed to be patient to continue showing my love and commitment to the family. The opportunity arose unexpectedly during a Sunday dinner at my parents' new home. My brothers and their families were present, a rare gathering of the entire family. The conversation turned to my father's upcoming 60th birthday. "We should do something special," my mother suggested. 60 is a milestone." "How about a weekend at the mountain cabin?" Jason proposed. "Dad has always loved it there." "In November," Michael countered. "It will be freezing." "What about a nice dinner at the Metropolitan Grill? Their steaks are Dad's favorite." I had been quiet during this exchange, but suddenly an idea struck me. "What about a cruise?" I suggested. "A family cruise to the Caribbean. Warm weather, beautiful beaches, activities for everyone, including the kids." The table fell silent as they considered my proposal. "A cruise," my father repeated, interest evident in his voice. "I have never been on one." "They are wonderful," I assured him. "Luxury accommodations, gourmet dining, entertainment every night, and you only have to unpack once while visiting multiple destinations." "It sounds expensive," my mother said cautiously. "It would be my gift to all of you for Dad's birthday," I clarified. "An all-expenses paid family vacation. We could go during Thanksgiving week when the kids are out of school. 7 days of sunshine and relaxation." My brothers exchanged glances, clearly tempted by the offer. "Would that include airfare to the departure port?" Jason asked. "Everything," I confirmed. "Flights, transfers, the cruise itself, all onboard expenses, and even shore excursions. A completely worry-free vacation for everyone." "That is extremely generous," Lillian, Michael's wife Jennifer, said, the first to verbally acknowledge the magnitude of my offer. My father, usually reserved with his emotions, broke into a broad smile. "A Caribbean cruise for my 60th. Who would have thought he raised his wine glass? I accept your gift, daughter. The warmth that spread through me at his words was indescribable. Daughter, not Lillian, an acknowledgement of our connection, our family bond. It felt like a breakthrough. The planning began immediately. I researched cruise lines and itineraries looking for the perfect combination of luxury activities and destinations. I settled on a premium cruise line known for its exceptional service and amenities, booking a 7-night Eastern Caribbean voyage departing from Fort Lauderdale. For my parents, I reserved a spacious suite with a private balcony butler service and access to exclusive areas of the ship. My brothers and their families received junior suites slightly smaller but still luxurious. For myself, I booked a standard balcony stateroom, comfortable but less extravagant. The itinerary included stops at private islands, with pristine beaches, historic San Juan, with its Spanish colonial architecture, and Street Thomas with its world-class shopping. I arranged special shore excursions at each port, a private catamaran sail and snorkel trip, a guided historical tour, a zip-line adventure for those feeling adventurous. As the departure date approached, my excitement grew. I purchased new resort-wear sundresses and swimsuits for the tropical climate. I ordered matching custom t-shirts for the entire family to wear on one of the days at sea, with Carter Family Cruise 2024 emblazoned across the chest. I even bought small gift bags for each family member filled with cruise essentials, sunscreen after sun, lotion motion, sickness remedies, and personalized water bottles. The week before departure, I flew to Seattle to help my parents prepare. We shopped for last-minute items they needed, and I assisted my mother with packing, advising her on appropriate attire for formal nights and shore excursions. I have never owned resort wear before, she admitted, holding up a flowered sundress we had purchased. It feels like playing dress-up. You will fit right in, I assured her, and you will look beautiful. My father was equally engaged in the preparations, studying the ship's deck plans I had printed out and planning which activities he wanted to try. Tai Chi at sunrise, he mused, reading from the program of daily activities. I have always been curious about that. On Wednesday evening, 3 days before our Saturday departure, I returned to my apartment after dinner with my parents to finish my own packing. My phone chimed with a text message notification. It was from my mother. Lillian, your father has been thinking about the cruise. He feels it should be just family. You do not need to come. He wants time with his sons and grandchildren. I am sorry. I stared at the message, unable to process the words at first. Just family, but I was family. I was their daughter, sister, aunt. And it was my gift paid for entirely by me. I called my mother immediately, but the call went to voicemail. I tried my father with the same result. Finally, I called Jason, who answered on the third ring. Is this some kind of joke? I demanded without preamble. Mom just texted that I am not welcome on the cruise. A pause then. Yeah, Dad mentioned something about wanting it to be just immediate family. I am immediate family, I nearly shouted. And I paid for the entire trip. Look, Lil, I do not know what to tell you. It is Dad's birthday cruise, and that is what he wants. Mom said you can still pay for everything, but just not come yourself. The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes, with me growing increasingly upset and Jason becoming more uncomfortable. Eventually, he made an excuse and ended the call. I sat in stunned silence, the phone still clutched in my hand. The message was unmistakable. I was not just family. Despite all my efforts, all my generosity, I remained on the outside looking in. And most shocking of all, they expected me to finance their family vacation while being explicitly excluded from it. I tried calling my parents again the next morning, and finally my father answered. Lillian, he said, his voice cool and detached. Your mother told me she messaged you about the cruise. Dad, I do not understand, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. This was meant to be a family vacation. I arranged everything. And we appreciate that, he replied. But I have been thinking about what I really want for my birthday, and that is quality time with my sons and grandchildren. You and I can celebrate when we return. But I paid for everything, I protested. The cruise is my gift to you. And it is a generous gift, he acknowledged. One we accept gratefully. But gifts do not come with conditions, Lillian. Once given, the recipient decides how to use them. His words struck me like physical blows. In his mind, the cruise was now his property to control and dictate terms about including who could and could not attend. The fact that I had created the entire experience, paid for every aspect of it, counted for nothing. "I see," I said finally, my voice hollow. "Enjoy your cruise." I hung up before he could respond, tears streaming down my face. I called Amanda, immediately pouring out the whole sordid story between sobs. "Those ungrateful, manipulative users," she fumed. "Lillian, I am so sorry, but this is exactly what I was afraid would happen. They are taking advantage of your generosity and your desire for their approval." "I cannot believe they would do this," I whispered. "After the house, after everything?" "The house," Amanda repeated slowly. "Lillian, whose name is on the deed to that house." I wiped my eyes, confused by the change of subject. "Mine. The lawyer advised me to keep it in my name for tax purposes, with an agreement that my parents could live there rent-free for life." "So legally it is still your house," she clarified. "Yes, but what does that have to do with anything?" Amanda's voice took on a determined edge. "It means you have options, Lillian. They cannot treat you this way and expect there to be no consequences." As the reality of my situation sank in, I opened my laptop and navigated to Instagram. There in my feed was a photo posted by Jennifer Michael's wife. It showed my entire family at the airport, smiling excitedly beneath a sign reading Cruise Terminal. The caption read, "Caribbean, here we come. Thanks Aunt Lillian for the amazing gift, family vacation, birthday cruise, blessed." The photo had been taken hours after I had been told not to come, yet there was no acknowledgement of the painful exclusion, just public thanks for my gift, as if everything were normal, and I had generously chosen to send them on vacation. Without me. I closed the laptop, a cold clarity replacing my earlier grief. For years I had sought their approval, their love, their inclusion. I had believed that if I achieved enough, gave enough, proved my worth thoroughly enough, they would finally accept me as an equal member of the family. Now I saw the truth: nothing would ever be enough, because the issue had never been with me. It was with them and their fundamental inability to value me for who I was. The time for seeking approval was over. Now it was time to stand up for myself, to establish boundaries, and to ensure that I would never be taken advantage of again. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of pain and disbelief. I alternated between periods of numbness and intense emotional outbursts, sometimes crying until I could barely breathe, other times sitting motionless, staring at nothing. Sleep eluded me completely that first night, and when morning came, I felt hollowed out, emptied of everything except a dull, persistent ache. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day in my apartment with the curtains drawn. My phone buzzed occasionally with notifications, but I could not bear to look at them, fearful of seeing more cruise photos or messages from my family that would only deepen my wounds. By evening, exhaustion finally overcame me, and I fell into a fitful sleep on the couch, still wearing the clothes from the day before. When I woke, disoriented and stiff, it was past midnight. I dragged myself to the shower, standing under the hot water until it ran cold, as if I could wash away the betrayal along with my tears. With my body clean but my heart still heavy, I made a cup of tea and forced myself to check my phone. There were several missed calls from Amanda, a few work emails I would need to address eventually, and a new Instagram post from my mother. Her first post in months showed her and my father on the ship's deck toasting with tropical cocktails as the Florida coastline receded in the background. The caption read, "Starting Richard's birthday celebration in style. Thank you for this wonderful gift. Blessed 6-0 and thriving family time." Family time. The words mocked me. I was family, or at least I had thought I was, but clearly in their minds I was separate, apart, not truly one of them. I was good enough to fund their experiences, but not to share in them. I called Amanda despite the late hour, knowing she would understand the urgency of my emotional state. "They are posting about it on social media," I said when she answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Acting like everything is normal, like I chose not to go." "Oh, Lillian," Amanda sighed, her voice thick with sleep but immediately alert to my distress. "I am so sorry. They do not deserve you. They never have." What did I do wrong? I asked, the question that had haunted me since childhood finally finding voice. Why have they never loved me the way they love my brothers? "You did nothing wrong," Amanda insisted firmly. "This is about them, not you." Some parents just pick favorites. It is cruel and it is wrong, but it happens. And your parents are taking advantage of your generosity and your desire to be accepted. We talked for over an hour, Amanda, listening as I cycled through grief, anger, confusion, and back to grief again. Finally, she asked the question I had been avoiding. So, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? I replied wearily. They are already on the cruise. I am not talking about the cruise, Lillian. I am talking about the house. Your house. I fell silent, considering her implication. You cannot let them get away with this, she continued. They have shown you exactly who they are and how they see you. You need to protect yourself now. You think I should sell the house, I said slowly, the idea simultaneously terrifying and empowering. I think you should stop allowing them to use you, Amanda clarified. If that means selling the house, then yes. They have made it clear that your relationship is transactional to them. You provide financial support, and they occasionally tolerate your presence when it suits them. The truth of her words cut deep, but they also clarified something for me. My relationship with my parents had indeed become transactional, but the transactions were entirely one-sided. I gave, they took, and the emotional return on my investment was minimal at best. I need to think about this, I said finally. It is a big decision. The next day, I forced myself to function. I responded to work emails, took a walk outside to clear my head, and even managed to eat a proper meal. All the while, my mind worked through the implications of what selling the house would mean. It would be a definitive statement, a line drawn in the sand. It would sever the financial tie that seemed to be the only real connection between us. It would be in many ways a final acknowledgement that the relationship I had hoped for would never materialize. I checked the cruise itinerary I had so carefully planned, 7 days at sea. They would return the following Saturday. That gave me a week to decide, and if I chose to sell, to put things in motion. That afternoon, I contacted the real estate lawyer who had handled the original purchase. I explained my situation and asked about the legal implications of selling a property currently occupied by family members. Since the house is solely in your name and there is no formal lease agreement, you have every legal right to sell it, she explained. The occupancy agreement you mentioned, allowing them to live there rent-free for life, was never legally formalized or recorded. It was more of a verbal understanding between family members. So there are no legal obstacles to me selling the house. None whatsoever. It is your property to do with as you wish. I thanked her and ended the call, still uncertain about my next steps, but now armed with the knowledge that legally I had options. That evening, more photos appeared on social media. My brothers and their families enjoying the ship's amenities, my parents at the formal dinner dressed in their finest. Everyone smiling, everyone happy in their exclusive family bubble, funded entirely by the daughter they had deemed unnecessary to the celebration. As I scrolled through the images, a coldness settled over me, replacing the raw pain of the previous days. This was not a single mistake or oversight on their part. This was a pattern, a clear statement of how they viewed me and my place in the family. No amount of success, generosity, or effort on my part would ever change that fundamental reality. I slept soundly that night for the first time since receiving my mother's text. In the morning, I called the real estate lawyer back and instructed her to begin the process of selling the house. I want a quick sale, I specified. Price it competitively to attract immediate interest. We can do that, she assured me. The market in that neighborhood is very active. With the right pricing strategy, we could have offers within days. Next, I arranged for a storage unit and a moving company. I would need to remove my parents' belongings from the house before showing it to potential buyers. I made it clear to the movers that everything was to be handled with utmost care and properly inventoried. Despite everything, I had no desire to damage or lose their personal possessions. The listing went live the next day, priced 10% below market value to generate immediate interest. By that evening, we had 3 offers, one of them above asking price, from a couple relocating to Seattle for work who needed to move quickly. I accepted their offer and instructed my lawyer to expedite the closing process as much as possible. With cash buyers eager to move in, we scheduled the closing for the day before my parents were due to return from their cruise. The movers arrived as scheduled carefully, packing my parents' clothing, personal items, photographs, and keepsakes. Everything was transported to the climate-controlled storage unit I had rented for 3 months paid in advance. I kept detailed records of what was stored and where, ensuring nothing would be lost or damaged. The furniture which I had purchased along with the house remained in place for the final showings and inspection. The buyers had expressed interest in purchasing much of it, which simplified the process further. As the closing date approached, I crafted a carefully worded email to my parents. I scheduled it to be delivered while they were still at sea, but near enough to their return that they would receive it before arriving home. Dear Mom and Dad, by the time you read this, I will have sold the house on Madison Park. Your personal belongings have been moved to a storage unit paid for 3 months in advance. The access details and inventory list are attached. I have come to understand that our relationship is not what I thought it was or what I hoped it could be. The decision to exclude me from the family cruise that I paid for made this painfully clear. I can no longer participate in a relationship where I am valued only for what I can provide financially. I wish you well in your future endeavors. Lillian. I included the storage unit details and a full inventory of their belongings, then scheduled the email to be sent the day before their return. The house closing proceeded smoothly. The buyers were delighted with their purchase, and the funds were transferred to my account. I provided them with a complete set of documentation about the house, including maintenance records, warranty information for appliances, and contact details for the various service providers I had arranged. The day my parents were scheduled to return, I checked their flight status online. Their plane would land at 7:30 that evening. The email I had scheduled was delivered at noon, giving them time to receive and process the information before they arrived to find strangers living in what had been their home. At 6:45 that evening, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails, all from my parents and brothers. I did not read or listen to any of them. Their content was predictable, and I had no interest in subjecting myself to their anger manipulation or attempts at guilt-tripping. Instead, I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt a sense of peace, of boundaries established and self-respect reclaimed. The house had been a beautiful dream, but it had been built on the quicksand of false expectations and one-sided love. Now that it was gone, I could begin to build something more substantial, a life defined by genuine connections and mutual respect, rather than the endless pursuit of approval I would never receive. The legal process of selling the house had been straightforward, thanks to my foresight in keeping the property in my name. The emotional fallout, however, was anything but simple. When I finally turned my phone back on the next morning, I had 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 9 voicemails. Most were from my mother, her messages evolving from confusion to disbelief to rage. The earliest text sent shortly after receiving my email read, "Lillian, is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately." An hour later, "Your father is furious. You cannot do this. The house was a gift." And finally, after they had presumably arrived at the address to find new owners in residence, "How could you do this to your own parents? After everything we have done for you." The irony of that last message was not lost on me. Everything they had done for me. What exactly was that? Years of emotional neglect, constant comparison to my brother's refusal to support my education or career choices, excluding me from a family vacation I had paid for. My father's voicemails were cold and threatening. "This is legally questionable at best," he stated in one message. "We had an agreement about that house. Expect to hear from our lawyer." In another, "You have no idea what you have done. This is not just about a house. This is about betraying your family. There will be consequences." I deleted them all without responding. My lawyer had confirmed that I was on solid legal ground. The house had been in my name, purchased with my money. The informal arrangement for them to live there had never been legally documented. They had no case, and my father as an accountant likely knew this. My brother's messages were a mix of disbelief and angry accusations. Jason demanded to know what I was thinking, while Michael, always the peacemaker, urged me to reconsider and make things right before the family was irreparably damaged. None of them not once acknowledged how they had hurt me. None questioned why I might have taken such a drastic step. In their minds, I was clearly the villain, the ungrateful daughter who had retaliated against some minor slight with nuclear force. I forwarded all the messages to my lawyer with instructions to respond to any legal threats, then blocked their numbers. I needed space and time to process my own feelings without the constant barrage of their accusations and demands. 3 days passed in blessed silence. I immersed myself in work, finding comfort in the logical problems of code and algorithms that had clear solutions, unlike the messy, emotional tangle of family relationships. My colleagues noted my renewed focus and energy, unaware of the personal drama unfolding behind the scenes. On the 4th day, as I was leaving my apartment for work, I found my mother waiting in the lobby. She looked smaller somehow, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled with dark circles under her eyes. "Lillian," she said, stepping forward as I froze in place. "We need to talk." "How did you find my apartment?" I asked, alarmed by this invasion of my personal space. "Your building was listed as the taxpayer address on the house documents," she explained. "Please just give me 5 minutes." I glanced at my watch, conflicted. "I have a meeting in 30 minutes. Then I will be brief." She gestured to a small seating area in the lobby away from the entrance and the curious eyes of the concierge. We sat stiffly across from each other, the plush lobby chairs at odds with the tension between us. "What you did was cruel," she began without preamble. "We came home from a wonderful vacation to find strangers living in our home. Do you have any idea how that felt?" "About as bad as being told I was not family enough to join a cruise I paid for," I replied evenly. "Or being expected to finance a life for people who have never truly supported or valued me." My mother flinched at the directness of my response. "That is not fair, Lillian. We have always loved you." "Love is not just a word, Mom. It is actions. It is support. It is inclusion. I have never had any of those things from you or Dad." "That is not true," she protested. "We raised you, we fed and clothed you, we gave you a home." Basic parental obligations, I countered. And even within those, I was always less than my brothers. Less loved, less supported, less valued. My mother looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Your father can be difficult, I know that. And perhaps we were harder on you than the boys. But that does not justify what you did." "I did not do this as punishment," I explained, surprised at how calm I felt. "I did it as self-preservation. The house was a symbol of my desperate need for your approval, a need that has shaped my entire life in unhealthy ways. Selling it was about freeing myself from that pattern." "By making your parents homeless," her voice rose slightly, drawing a glance from the concierge. "You are not homeless," I corrected her. "Your belongings are safely in storage, paid for 3 months in advance. And with both of you still working, you can easily afford an apartment while you decide on your next steps." "Your father wants to sue you," she said, a hint of threat in her voice. I nodded, having expected this. "He can try, but the house was legally mine. There was no formal agreement about your occupancy. Any lawyer will tell him the same thing mine told me." A long silence stretched between us, the impasse clear. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice softer. "What do you want from us, Lillian?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? After a lifetime of seeking their approval, of trying to earn their love, what was I actually hoping for now? "I want a relationship based on mutual respect," I said slowly, thinking through my response. "One where I am valued as a person, not as a financial resource. One where I am included as a full member of the family, not an afterthought or an outsider. But I do not know if that is possible with you and Dad." My mother's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I had seen from her in this encounter. "He is so angry right now. I do not know if he can get past this." "That is his choice," I said, standing up. "And yours. But I will not participate in the old dynamic anymore. I cannot." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Will you at least talk to him? Just once?" I paused, considering her request. "I will meet with both of you once in a public place. Text me when and where. But I will not be yelled at or threatened." She nodded gratefully, and I continued to the door, already questioning the wisdom of agreeing to such a meeting. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown that none of us frequented regularly. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner where we would have some privacy but still be surrounded by other patrons, a buffer against my father's potential anger. They arrived together, my mother looking anxious, my father's face set in hard lines. They sat across from me, neither speaking immediately. "Thank you for meeting us," my mother finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. My father got straight to the point. "What you did was unforgivable." "I disagree," I replied calmly. "What I did was establish a boundary after years of being undervalued and taken advantage of." "Taken advantage of," he scoffed. "We never asked you for that house." "No, but you accepted it readily enough, and then proceeded to treat me exactly as you always had, even excluding me from a family vacation I paid for entirely." "That was my birthday cruise," he countered. "I wanted to spend it with family." "I am family," I said, my voice steady, despite the familiar pain his words caused. Or at least I thought I was. But clearly in your mind I am something else. A wallet, perhaps. A source of financial support, but not truly a daughter worthy of inclusion. My father's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. "We never meant to hurt you, Lillian," she said softly. "The cruise. It was a misunderstanding." It was not a misunderstanding. It was a clear message about my place in this family, and it was the final one I needed to receive. My father leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. "So, you punish us by making us homeless, by embarrassing us in front of our friends and neighbors? Do you have any idea what this has done to our reputation in the community?" "This was not about punishment," I insisted. "It was about no longer participating in a relationship that causes me pain. The house was my property, and I chose to sell it rather than continue enabling a dynamic that has been harmful to me since childhood." "Harmful." My father practically spat the word. "We gave you everything." "No," I corrected him. "You gave my brothers everything. Support, encouragement, financial assistance for their education, praise for their accomplishments. I received criticism, dismissal, and was left to make my own way." "And look how well you turned out," he retorted. "Clearly our approach worked." The comment was so stunning in its lack of self-awareness that I could only stare at him for a moment. He was actually taking credit for my success, as if his neglect and dismissal had been some kind of strategic parenting choice rather than simple favoritism. "I succeeded despite your lack of support. Not because of it," I said, finally. "And I am done trying to earn the love and approval that should have been freely given." My mother began to cry silently, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. My father sat back in his chair, his anger seemingly replaced by a cold assessment. "What do you want?" he asked, echoing my mother's question from days earlier. "I want a relationship with my parents that is based on mutual respect and genuine care," I replied. "Not one where my value is determined by what I can provide financially or how well I conform to your expectations." "And the house," he pressed. "What about our home?" "The house is sold," I stated firmly. "That decision is final. If you want a relationship with me moving forward, it will be on new terms. Terms that include respect for my boundaries and recognition of me as an equal member of this family." My father was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed my words. Finally, he stood abruptly. "We are done here," he announced. "Come, Eleanor." My mother hesitated, looking between my father and me, torn between her husband's command and her daughter's pain. "Mom," I said gently, "you have a choice too. You always have." She squeezed my hand briefly before rising to follow my father. At the door, she turned back, her expression unreadable, before stepping out into the street. I remained at the table, sipping my now cold coffee, feeling both drained and oddly peaceful. The conversation had gone exactly as I had expected, and yet I felt lighter for having had it. I had spoken my truth clearly and calmly, without being drawn into their emotional manipulations or guilt trips. It was in many ways the first truly adult conversation I had ever had with my parents. Whether it would be the last remained to be seen. 6 months passed, like the turning of seasons each day, bringing subtle changes that accumulated into transformation. I moved from Seattle to New York, accepting a position with a promising tech startup that allowed me to channel my expertise into meaningful work. The 3,000-mile distance provided not just physical space from my family, but emotional breathing room to reflect and heal. The first month of silence was the hardest. Despite everything, I found myself checking my phone for messages that never came, composing emails in my head that I never sent. 32 years of seeking approval could not be undone in a single act of boundary setting, no matter how dramatic. Amanda suggested I find a therapist, and for once I followed someone else's advice without resistance. Dr. Rachel Simmons specialized in family trauma and adult children of emotionally unavailable parents. Our weekly sessions became anchors in my new life safe harbors, where I could examine the patterns that had shaped me. What you are experiencing is grief, Dr. Simmons explained during one particularly difficult session. Not just for the relationship you have lost, but for the relationship you never had and always wanted. I found unexpected solidarity in a support group for adults estranged from their parents. The stories shared there echoed elements of my own experience, the desperate attempts to earn love, the moving goalposts of parental approval, the painful recognition that some wounds might never heal completely. The hardest part, shared one group member, a woman in her 40s, was accepting that I would never have the mother I needed. Once I grieved that loss, I could begin building the life I deserved. Her words resonated deeply. I had spent my entire life trying to become the daughter my parents would love, never questioning whether they were capable of being the parents I needed. The shift in perspective was both painful and liberating. Spring blossomed in New York, bringing with it new friendships and connections. My colleagues at the startup were brilliant and passionate, more interested in my ideas than my family background or bank account. We worked hard during the week and explored the city on weekends, finding joy in simple pleasures, farmers markets in Union Square, free concerts in Central Park, art exhibitions in small galleries off the beaten path. I began volunteering with an organization that taught coding skills to girls from underserved communities. Watching their faces light up when they successfully debugged a program or created their first web page reminded me of my own childhood passion for technology before it became entangled with my need for parental approval. "You are an amazing teacher," one 12-year-old girl told me after mastering a particularly challenging concept. "I want to be just like you when I grow up." Her admiration, freely given, without agenda or condition, brought tears to my eyes. This was value based on who I was, not what I could provide. This was the recognition I had always sought, but in its purest form. As summer approached, I received an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line was simple: "Thinking of you." "Dear Lillian," she wrote, "I hope this message finds you well. Your father and I have moved into a condo near our old neighborhood. It is smaller than the house, but comfortable for our needs. Your brothers help us when necessary, though your father dislikes asking for assistance. I miss our Sunday dinners and hearing about your work. If you are ever back in Seattle, perhaps we could meet for coffee. With love, Mom." No mention of the house, no apology for the cruise. Just a simple opening, a tentative bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. I read and reread the message, trying to discern its true meaning, its hidden agendas. In therapy, I had learned to recognize my tendency to overanalyze family communications, searching for traps and tests where they might not exist. After careful consideration, I replied with equal simplicity. "Thank you for reaching out. I am well enjoying my new job and life in New York. Coffee sounds nice if I make it back to Seattle. Take care, Lillian." Not effusive, not coldly dismissive. A response that acknowledged her outreach without immediately falling back into old patterns. Dr. Simmons approved when I shared it in our next session. "You are setting the pace for this renewed communication," she noted. "That is a significant change from your previous dynamic." 2 more months passed, with occasional brief emails exchanged. My mother shared small updates about her life, careful to keep the tone light and undemanding. I responded in kind, sharing select details about New York and my work, but maintaining clear boundaries. In late August, business brought me to Seattle for a conference. After some deliberation, I texted my mother, "In town for work this weekend. Available for that coffee on Saturday afternoon if it still works for you." Her response came quickly: "Yes, I would like that. Your father would like to join if that is acceptable." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. The last time I had seen my father, he had stormed out of our meeting, unwilling to acknowledge any perspective but his own. Was I ready to face him again? Had anything really changed? After consulting with Dr. Simmons, I decided to agree, but with conditions. "Coffee with both of you is fine," I replied, "but I need to know this will be a respectful conversation. I will not subject myself to anger or accusations." Understood, came my mother's response. We both want to see you. We met at a quiet cafe in Pike Place Market neutral territory, filled with tourists and locals alike. My mother arrived first, looking older than I remembered, but well-dressed and put together as always. She embraced me cautiously as if afraid I might pull away. I returned the hug briefly before sitting down. My father arrived 5 minutes later. He had lost weight, his usually robust frame appearing somewhat diminished. He nodded at me stiffly, sitting down without attempting physical contact. You look well, my mother offered after we had ordered. New York must agree with you. It does, I confirmed. The energy of the city suits me. Your company is doing important work, my father said unexpectedly. I read about your project in the Wall Street Journal. I blinked, surprised, not just by his knowledge of my work, but by his choice to lead with it. Thank you. It has been challenging but rewarding. A brief, uncomfortable silence fell. My mother filled it with small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, mutual acquaintances. My father remained mostly quiet, watching me with an expression I could not quite read. Finally, as our coffee cups emptied, he cleared his throat. Lillian, I want to say something. My body tensed, involuntarily preparing for attack. I nodded cautiously. What you did with the house, he began, and I braced myself for recriminations. But he surprised me. It was within your rights. The house was yours. We should have respected your position in the family, more particularly regarding the cruise. It was not exactly an apology, but from my father it was unprecedented. An acknowledgement, however, indirect, that I had been wronged. I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but found only discomfort and perhaps a trace of regret. Thank you for saying that, I replied carefully. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. We have been doing some thinking, my mother added, glancing at my father, about how we treated you compared to your brothers. It was not fair or right. No, I agreed. It was not. I cannot change the past, my father said, his voice gruff with unaccustomed emotion. But I am an old man now, and I do not want to die estranged from my daughter. The simplicity and honesty of his statement caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw him not as the towering figure of my childhood, the arbiter of worth and value, but as an aging man confronting his mortality and the consequences of his choices. I do not want that either, I admitted. But I cannot go back to how things were. I need to know that you see me, that you value me for who I am, not what I can provide. We are learning, my mother said softly. It is not easy to change habits of a lifetime, but we are trying. We talked for another hour, more openly than we ever had before. There were difficult moments, old hurts that surfaced, defensive reactions that needed to be navigated. But underneath it all was something new, a willingness to listen, to acknowledge, to consider perspectives other than their own. As we prepared to leave, my father asked hesitantly, "Will you keep in touch?" "Yes," I said, realizing as I spoke that I meant it. "But on new terms, equal terms." He nodded, accepting this condition without argument. As we stood on the sidewalk outside the cafe, my mother embraced me again, this time with less reservation. My father, after a moment's awkwardness, did the same, his arms stiff but genuine. Walking back to my hotel, I felt lighter, as if I had set down a burden I had carried for so long that it had become part of me. Not healed, not completely, but beginning to heal. Not forgetting, but perhaps starting to forgive for my sake more than theirs. In the months that followed, we established a new relationship, one built on honesty rather than expectation. We spoke every few weeks, short conversations that acknowledged the limitations of our connection but also its possibilities. My father made halting efforts to understand my work, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity rather than dismissal. My mother shared more of herself, revealing vulnerabilities and regrets that humanized her in ways I had never experienced before. When I returned to Seattle for the holidays, I stayed in a hotel rather than with them, maintaining the boundary that protected my independence. We had dinner together, twice, meals that were sometimes uncomfortable but increasingly authentic. My brothers and their families joined us for one of these dinners, the dynamic between us all subtly altered by the changes in my relationship with our parents. "You seem different," Jason commented as we waited for our cars after dinner. "Stronger, somehow." "I am," I confirmed. I finally learned that I do not need anyone else's approval to value myself. The greatest lesson from this painful journey was one I continued to integrate: daily true love cannot be bought or earned. It is freely given, or it is not love at all. My worth was never determined by my parents' ability to recognize it. It was inherent, unchangeable mine regardless of their perception. I also learned the power of boundaries, not as weapons or walls, but as definitions of self-respect. By clarifying what I would and would not accept in relationships, I created space for connections based on mutual respect, rather than obligation or transaction. Most importantly, I discovered that family is not just defined by blood or history, but by how we treat each other. Some of the most profound family bonds in my life now are with people who have no genetic connection to me, but who see value and support me without condition or expectation. The house that had been both gift and burden was gone, but what remained was more valuable: the truth of who we were to each other, and the possibility, however fragile, of building something more authentic from that truth. Sometimes losing what you thought was family makes room for discovering what real love and respect actually look like. And while our relationship will never be perfect, at least now it is honest. What has been your experience with setting boundaries in family relationships? Drop a comment below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never dependent on someone else's ability to see it. Share this with someone who might need to hear that today.